So, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Paula Adams. I'm from Estill County, born and raised here. A mother of 2 kids, Dalton and Micah Adams, married to Greg Adams. My oldest son, Dalton, passed away September the 15th of 2019 from a drug overdose. And I'll give you a little bit of a history on Dalton and tell his story, kind of, and a history of how it affects the families when addiction is in your family.
You're listening to The Local Lens, the podcast from the Powell County Health Department where we go inside our community's experience with the drug epidemic. We're coming to you from Stanton, Kentucky, nestled at the foothills of Appalachia. The Local Lens is from the Powell County Health Department's CARES project and also Kentucky RIO's COACH project. The whole goal of this show is to capture as many unique perspectives on the addiction issue as we can so that we can all learn to see addiction from a more whole perspective ourselves. And on this episode, we're joined by Paula Adams, who is going to tell us one of the most heartbreaking sides to this story that there could possibly be as a mother who lost a child to addiction. So she's going to start telling her story soon, and we're not going to interrupt it at all. So this episode is quite a bit longer than most of ours. Going back through the editing process, I usually cut these down quite a bit so they fit in a 30-minute time frame, but I didn't feel like I could cut anything away from this episode. All of it is too important for us to hear to take anything out of it. So this is a special, very heavy episode that we didn't want to take anything away from. But anyways, let's go on and get into it. You're listening to The Local Lens. I'm your host, Nate Brooks. These are our people, using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do.
Yes, it affects a lot of families. People don't realize, the community has said, and other people was like, I did not realize Dalton was an addict. I would have never known your son was an addict. He was so mannerly, polite, funny, when we would have never known. We as a family did not realize Dalton had an addiction problem until he was a senior in high school. And I got a phone call one day and he had attempted suicide. When we got to him, got him to the hospital, later that evening the doctor came out and told us that he did not understand why Dalton was still alive. He had enough drugs in his system that he should have been dead, and he was sitting there talking to him. And this was several hours before we got him to a hospital because he kept refusing to go when we would get him awake enough to talk. He never really told us why or what started his addiction. He just said the first time he used, he just felt like a totally different person. And he started with drinking, then it went to smoking pot, and from there it went to the harder drugs. At the end of not at the end of his addiction, but before he went to the rehab for the last time, he didn't really have a drug of choice. He would use whatever he could get a hold of. I know a lot of addicts have a drug of choice and that's all they'll use, but Dalton would use whatever. As a child, Dalton had several heart surgeries. He had 2 heart surgeries when he was a baby. Both times the doctors came out, couldn't tell us why he was still living except for it was God, because he should have went to sleep and never woke up before he had either one of those. He had several other surgeries as a child, but we would have never thought that our child would have been an addict. He told us numerous times, this is not the life I want, this isn't who I want to be. But he just seemed to not be able to beat it. He joined the military. He graduated high school, was doing good. Joined the military, seemed to be doing good. I'm sure he was always in some form of addiction. It just wasn't an addiction that we knew about. He did like to drink, but he would always say, when I start drinking, I always know after a certain point, I'm going to start back on drugs. So he would go from drinking back to the drugs. He got out went to the military, came back from the military, bought him a Harley, had a good job, seemed to be doing good, and then all of a sudden he would just hit rock bottom. He went to, in 2013, he went into rehab, went in the military in 2014. In 2015, he would go to rehab, but at that time, our insurance would only pay for like 14 days, and 14 days by no means is enough time in a recovery center to get you where you need to be to come out. Mm-hmm. Drugs just have too big of a hold on you. 14 days is not enough. Mm-hmm. He needed a long-term facility. So in 2016, he was supposed to go on vacation with us. The night we were leaving for vacation, he decided he wasn't going to go. I knew deep down that was not a good decision for us to leave him at home. But he was 20-some years old. I couldn't make him go, so we left him at home. When we came back in from vacation, and numerous times before, he had stolen things or stuff had went missing. And I've always been one of these that was on top of everything that I had, and money-wise, stuck in the safe. Money here hidden, this piece of jewelry missing. And he had me at a point, I thought I was going crazy. I knew I got $20 out of the bank. It was in my purse, but I've lost it. Because I would ask, "Does anybody know where this went?" No. So I had got to the manipulation that they can do, or he did with us, had me at a point that I thought I was somehow losing my mind. So we came back from vacation, and he had taken a lot of stuff and sold it. We had him arrested. He went to jail. I had told him before, because things had went missing, I had told him that if he didn't straighten up, he was going to end up in jail. And I promised him, I said, if you ever go to jail, I won't come get you out of jail. So me and his dad, of course, did not want him to be in jail, but we had him arrested. So we talked to the county attorney, we talked to the lawyer, and they agreed that instead of him going to jail, he could go to rehab if he would agree to that. So Dalton agreed to go to rehab. So that was his very first semi-long rehab, I guess. He went into rehab in June of 2016, and he got out of rehab the last week of December of 2016, which again, that was not enough time for him. He seemed to do good in rehab. Again, he would get out, come home. I would try to convince him not to come back to Estill County, but he wanted to come home. So those charges, because he fulfilled the rehab at the Mark Center in Bowling Green, he fulfilled that. Those charges was dropped because he did what we asked him to do, and that was the agreement with the judge. So he come back to Irvin. He would do good for a while. And then he would start, I could tell. And I would say, Dalton, are you doing anything? No, Mom. No, I'm still good. I'm still good. Dalton. He would go to a meeting here. He would go to a meeting there, but he would never consistently go any place. He would keep a job for a while, or we thought he was keeping a job. And he would work a while, save up enough money, lose that job because he either tested positive or whatever, decided he didn't want to go to work that day or whatever it may be. Him and his brother would argue a lot. He would take from his brother, but his brother would never tell us anything he had taken from him.
What was the age difference?
6 years.
6 years, okay.
So when Dalton was a senior, Micah was in 6th grade.
Okay.
He would take Micah's stuff, but Micah would never tell on him. The first time Micah ever told that Dalton had taken anything was in 2016, and his addiction started in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think. So in 2017, Dalton got into trouble again. And he begged us to go to rehab in California. If I can go to California, it'll be good. I'll be able to come back. I'll go there. It'll get me away from everybody. I'll be able to finish that. So our insurance did pay for him to go to California to rehab. He left in July of 2017. They kept him till August and let him come home for a week. Then he had to go back. So he went in the first week of July, come back the end of August. He went back to California to rehab and stayed till sometime in November. When he came home in November, he had to go to sober living. And of course, there's no sober living in Estill County, which was a good thing, I thought. He'll be all right. We'll keep him somewhere else. It'll be better off. He went to sober living in Fayette County. That might have been in September. I think that was September, and he ended up going back to California because in sober living, he got in trouble and they kicked him out. And he wasn't there a week. So he goes back. When he comes back the third time from California from rehab, because they kept taking him back, my opinion, and this was my opinion only, he was on more drugs when he came back from rehab that had been prescribed for him that was illegal in Kentucky than it was before he left. So when he came back, he was actually, again in my opinion, in worse shape than he was when he left.
What kind of drugs were
they? I don't even know the names of them, but they were all in California was legal by prescription, but in Kentucky they was not.
Like, were they like addiction treatment? Okay.
Well, it was like, I know they had put him on like gabapentin. He was on, I know that was one of them. He was on Norco when he came back. He had all kinds of extensive testing out there. And when he came back, like, they were giving him this for back pain, and they would give him, I think the Norco was for his back pain. He didn't have a back problem. They done several tests and then decided that he could get these prescription painkillers out there. His family doctor here agreed, no, you've never had a history of this. We're not going to give you this. So then he had to go through withdrawal on that or get it from the street. And that is a downfall, I feel, because we should have probably not sent him to California, but we did. I mean, he wanted to go to rehab, they took him, that's where he wanted to go, so we sent him. So that was in 2017. He came home. The last Christmas we had with him was the Christmas of 2017, because the Christmas of 2018 he left again and he went to Morehead Inspiration. In between that time frame, he was working in Madison County. His car had tore up, so he was driving my vehicle to work. He got caught in Madison County. He ran into a friend, got drugs, was going back to work, and ended up passing out under the wheel of my vehicle in front of Kroger's. The people that pulled over, because he didn't go on, the police, they called the police. They couldn't get, of course, into the vehicle. He was slumped over the steering wheel. By the grace of God, he was still in drive. His foot did not fall off the brake.
Wow.
They busted the back two windows out of my vehicle to get into him, and he goes to jail. They take him to the hospital, then he goes to jail. So he got possession, driving under the influence, and he had to stay in jail in Madison County. And that was around Thanksgiving, I believe, of 2018. So he was on probation and parole. They moved his case from Madison County to Estill County because he lived in Estill County with us. From there, he ended up breaking his parole again, or failed a drug screen, so he went to Morehead Inspiration the first week of December of 2018. He got out of Morehead Inspiration in July of 2019. And when he came home, he seemed to have been doing better than he had ever done. He kept a job. He paid his own car insurance. He paid his own cell phone bill. He didn't ask us for money at that point, and that was unusual because usually he would say, "Oh, I need a tank of gas." And my deal was with him, I'm not giving you cash anymore. At this point, I'm not giving you cash. I'll take you to the gas station. I'll follow you to the gas station. I'll fill your vehicle up, but I'm not giving you gas. And before we ever got to that point of him even in between some of these time frames, it would get so bad, and I would get so angry with him over his addiction. And I would go to Al-Anon. I started going to Al-Anon meetings, and everybody said, tough love, tough love, tough love. Don't enable him. So I would make him move out. I would say, you're not going to live here. You're not going to have drugs in my house. You got a younger brother in the house. We're not doing this. You have to leave. So he would go to McDonald's and sleep in the parking lot. In his vehicle, he would sleep in his Save-A-Lot parking lot. And again, I wouldn't give him money, but I always made sure he had a cell phone because I always wanted to have a connection in case he needed me, in case he decided it was time for me to go to rehab and get clean. Because I kept thinking, if I show him I'm not going to put up with him living in my house this way, he'll want to get clean. Tough love didn't work. I would cook breakfast in the mornings. His brother would fix him a plate, put him some water outside, put it in a wagon, and text him. Mom's fixed breakfast. We're leaving the house. Put you some food out today so you're not hungry. His papa would come off the mountain, and of course, so a couple days a week, and he knew Dalton was staying in his car, he would get him some food and take to him. And Dalton would always tell me, he'd say, Mom, when you put me out, you're just making it harder because I'm having to either stay at a dealer's house or I'm sleeping in my car. But I always thought, well, he'll see the light. He'll see that we can't do this. We can't do this. before Dalton passed away in September, from 2013 until the night he passed away, he had overdosed that we know of 7 times. He got up he had overdosed at the stoplight. The very first time he had overdosed, which was in 2013. He overdosed at the stoplight in my vehicle. One morning he got up for work. Heard him get up for work. It was on a Saturday. He went to the restroom, but he went back to his room. And I told my husband, I'm like, Greg, I don't hear him. Something's wrong. He said, he's all right, whatever. So we hollered. Greg hollered, and he didn't answer. So he went in there, and I could tell by the sound of Greg's voice something was wrong. So when I get to Dalton's bedroom, I jump up and I run in Dalton's bedroom, and he was slumped over out of the bed. He was foaming he was slobbering, foaming was coming out of his mouth, and he was already turning purple. So Dalton was probably 6'3", 6'4", probably weighed 180 pounds at that time, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I jerked him up in the bed and just started beating on his chest, hitting his chest. He wasn't breathing. He didn't have a pulse. And we didn't have Narcan. And I didn't know what else to do. I hollered for Greg to call 911. And finally, just by the grace of God, he came back before the ambulance got there. And he was like, Mom, what have you done to me? What are you doing? And he didn't even realize he had overdosed. He overdosed in Save-A-Lot parking lot. The ambulance came to him there. My cousin found him. And after they Narcaned him, he refused to go to the hospital, and he came home. And that was one of the times that he was not living at home, that I had put him out, and he was sleeping in his car. So we talked, and I agreed that if he would agree to go to rehab, he could come in and sleep a few hours. Instead of being the mom that said, you're going to rehab now, let me lay down, let me take a shower. After I sleep a few hours, you can take me to rehab. So that happened. His dad comes in from work, and Micah's there, and Micah may have been 16. Micah wasn't 16 yet. He was probably 15 when this happened. So we're talking about him going to rehab, and he just goes belligerent. And he looks at his dad, and he had never been violent with his dad. He could have probably hit me 1,000,000 times before that, because he would get angry at me, because I was always the one that said, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, the one that was always fussing. But he looks at his dad, and he tells his dad he's going to kick his hind end. So I immediately, and this is the day he had overdosed, and they had Narcaned him at Save-A-Lot. So I look at Micah and I say, go, get out of the house, leave. Don't come back till I call you, go to a neighbor's. And he went ahead and he said, here's the phone, call 911, because they're going to be coming to pick you up. And him and Greg argued a little bit, and he got in his car and left. Didn't hear from him for a few days, and that's probably the scariest, worst feeling of a parent, is when they leave and they won't call you, or you don't know where they're at. So at that time, he was with a friend. His friend's mom calls and says, my son, have you seen from the boys? And I said, no. So it was another day went by, and she called me and said, my son's been found in Richmond. He doesn't know if Dalton is still in the house or not, but he escaped a drug dealer's house. So I immediately get my vehicle. She tells me where he was found at, the area. go to Madison County looking for my kid. As a parent, or anybody that loves an addict, I don't know, you don't think about the worst that can happen to you, you're thinking about the worst that can happen to them. Drove up and down the road in front of where these people were supposed to be at. And finally, I get a call that he's back in Irvin. And Doc would always tell me, because I would confront people. He'd say, Mom, you're going to get me killed or you're going to get yourself killed. And it's not worth it. You can't be calling these dealers out in public. You can't be yelling at this lady in Walmart that you know sold me drugs and telling everybody in Walmart about it. And I'm like, yes, I can. You're my child. You can't threaten people at Safe Lot that they can't sell drugs to me anymore, because you're going to get me killed and you're going to get yourself killed. So, again, then he, Thanksgiving, it was the week of Thanksgiving. Well, before that, let me go back. Micah was wanting to go hunting. And I think this was at one of Dalton's lowest points. Micah was wanting to go hunting. He was 16. So Dalton asked his dad if he could take Micah hunting. And he said, it's up to Micah. So Micah agreed. So they got up that morning and went hunting. What we didn't find out was, until later, that Dalton convinced Micah to make a stop. And we found out that he had Micah drive to a drug dealer's house so he could get out and get some drugs. From there, they went on hunting. Dalton had told Micah that he would be down in a few minutes, just leave him in the vehicle. So Micah starts over to go hunting, and Dalton doesn't show up. So he goes back to the vehicle to check on his brother, and he's laying in the back seat having a seizure because with the needle in his arm because he's overdosed. He calls and says, what did I do? Take him to the hospital. My opinion again on this one is no 16-year-old should ever see their brother overdose and should not be responsible for taking them to the hospital. Was that a good choice for me and his dad to let him go hunting that morning with his brother? I don't know. He loved his brother. What do you say? So we get Dalton to the hospital. Micah brings him to the hospital, and they take him in. Again, can't convince him to go anywhere. I'll be fine, I'm going to do better. He apologizes to Micah, whatever. And at that point, Micah has decided, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I can't go with you places. I just can't. He just can't do it. So him and Dalton and Micah's relationship was rocky. Micah loved him. And Dalton loved him. So he ends up going to Moorhead Inspiration. Like I said, he overdoses again at home before that. That was close to Thanksgiving too. And had it not been for our neighbors up on the hill, he wouldn't have made it. They're both, she works at the hospital. He is an EMT. And my husband says he doesn't understand why. He never leaves work early. But he came through the cafeteria and something told him to go on and leave work. And when he got home, Dalton was at home, and he hollered for Dalton when he got in the house, and Dalton didn't respond, and he went in there and he had overdosed, and the needle was laying on the bed. So he calls 911, and he calls me, and then he calls 911. So our neighbors come over the hill, and luckily they Narcaned him, and he went to the hospital that time. And he agreed to go to he kept saying, when they finally got him to, he didn't even know what was going on. He didn't know why everybody was around him. He didn't have a clue. He agreed to go to the hospital that day. We went to the hospital, and Dr. Eugenio told him, she said, if you do not get yourself lined out, you're going to die. She said, and at that point, I think he had, because he overdosed once in California, so at that time, he had overdosed 6 times that we knew of at that time. But she talked to him, and he kept saying, no, I'm not going to die. So I set him down. His dad and Micah was gone, and it was just me and him at home. And one night, and I set him down, and I told him, I said, Dalton, if you don't get straightened up, you're going to die. No, Mom, I'm not. I'm not going to be an addict. I'm not going to be an addict. I'm getting lined out. I don't want to be an addict. It's not the life I want. I don't want to be this person. And I said, Dalton, when something happens to you, if you don't get yourself lined out, I cannot plan your funeral. So Dalton had a love of music, and he loved music. So he sat down with his guitar that night, and me and him talked. And we discussed his funeral, what songs he wanted played at his funeral, and what he didn't want at his funeral. And that's a very hard conversation to have with your child, because no parent should have to bury a child. So a couple weeks after that is when he ends up going to Moorhead Inspiration. So he went to Moorhead. Like I said, he went in December, so that was December 2018. We didn't get to see him for Christmas. And he seemed to be doing good. When he got out, it was in July of 2019. And we still thought like I said, we still thought he was doing good, because he got out, he got a job, he paid his own car insurance, he paid his cell phone bill, he never asked us for money. But he wasn't fine. Well, he had passed 2 drug tests the week, like on a Thursday before he passed away and a Friday before he passed away. From work, he had passed 2 drug tests. He had been to Richmond to talk to a guy about a tattoo that he wanted to have done, and he told that guy his story, because his brother had been the week before that and got a tattoo, and the guy was talking to him about Micah. On Friday night, he passed away on Sunday. On Friday night, he went to Berea. He went to Berea. And while he was at Berea, he met a lady in McDonald's that knew my dad from Renfro. Then she played music at Renfro Valley. And again, Dalton was raised in church, but he would always tell me when something would happen, he would say, Mom, if there's a God, he wouldn't have let me be sick when I was little, and I wouldn't be an addict. He would cure me. But yet again, I would say, but Dalton, you have came close to death all these times, and God is keeping you here for a reason. I don't know what your reason is, but God's kept you here or you would have died a long time ago. But he met this lady, and I don't remember what his quote was on Facebook about her, but they talked for quite some time. But that night, Dalton said, someone bigger than myself, or bigger, some spirit has placed her in my life tonight. And she prayed with Dalton that night. And then he passed away on Sunday. And I think that God did put that lady in his path that night. Just to, I don't know, maybe make him realize that there is somebody out there bigger, and it was God, and he was watching over him all those years. But the addict doesn't always realize the pain they're putting their family through. The addict is living through pain because they don't want to be that person. They don't want the life they're living. They don't want to lie to their family. They don't want to steal from their family. They don't want to be that person. And Dalton would see me get very angry with him sometimes, and he would say, Mom, I know when to stop because you get this look. And it's kind of scary. And I'm like, yes, Dalton. Yes, I'm just trying to protect you. As a mom, that's what I am here to do. I'm here to protect you. And if I could have taken his addiction, cured him of his addiction, I would have. And I think that's something a lot of people don't understand, even in your community. Like, they'll see people and they'll automatically judge them as an addict, and they might not be an addict. And they'll see somebody else that is a full-blown addict and not think twice about it. And then if they ever hear that you're an addict, it's like you've got the plague. They can't get around you because they might become an addict. Or anything that you have laying there, they're going to steal. And that's not that person. That person doesn't want to be in addiction. They want to be loved. They want to be trusted. They need reassurance that you've got their back. They need you to pray for them, and they need you to love them. No matter what they've done, you have to keep loving that addict. You have to keep praying for that addict. And you have to try to bless them in some way. You have to reassure them that no matter what they've done, you still stand with them and love them. And I think prayer and love is what gets a lot of people that is in addiction and in recovery to stay in recovery. Because when they always feel they're judged. Even years down the road, I know I talked to a guy, and he said, it took me many, many years for people to quit judging me as an addict. Although I had a career, I got up and I went to work every day. Even people that my addiction never affected, they still judged me. And when you're being judged, it's hard to stay clean. It's hard to want to stay clean. It's hard to want to stay sober, because every time you walk out of the room, he said he felt like people was saying, well, when's he going to use next? So you have to forgive the actions of that addict, and you have to love them. And although Dalton probably felt like I didn't love him a lot of times, because I would say, You're not living here. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. I never stopped loving him. But you got to make that addict feel like they're loved. No matter what.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I just hope the reason that I go places and speak or do things or talk to people is because I hope I can help one person or say something to help one addict or one family not go through what we've went through. Because not only is it hard on, I don't think the addict always realizes how hard it is on the family. And I know their life is rough because they don't want to be that person. But as a family member, you don't always know what the right decision is to make for them either. You're just trying your best to help them.
Well, that brings us to the end of our episode today. Thank you guys for sticking around through the whole thing. I know it's a very, very, very heavy subject to be hearing about, but it is endlessly important that we hold the weight of this situation in our heads. Because I know for myself, as a worker in this field, it's easy to lose sight of how high the stakes are in this field. Because there are a lot of mothers who share similar experiences with Paula. But I have nothing more to add to this conversation. Thank you so much, Paula, for coming on the show, for showing your bravery and courage and your heart and being so vulnerable with us. Thank you so much for stepping up and doing this. WSKV, we would like to thank WSKV for broadcasting our show on the radio. And also, I'd like to give a big thanks to the Powell County Health Department and Kentucky Rio for sponsoring the show and letting it be a thing. And if you want to get involved and do what you can to help out, then reach out to some of these groups, reach out to the health department and see where you can get involved at. This is the local lens. These are our people using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do.